Sometime, a nation doesn't fight an enemy outside its borders. It bleeds from within. Year 1861. The United States of America, torn apart by its own people, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor. A war not for gold, not for power, but for freedom itself. And in the heart of that chaos, one truth echoed louder than every cannon fire: freedom has a price. This is the story James M. McPherson told in Battle Cry of Freedom, a story of pain, courage, and the rebirth of a nation. 1. The fire before the storm. Before the first bullet was fired, America was already tearing apart, quietly, painfully. It was a country that called itself the land of the free, yet half of it was built on slavery, on chains, blood, and human suffering. The North was changing fast. Machines, factories, new ideas, new dreams. They believed the world was moving forward, that every man had a right to freedom, to dignity. But the South wanted to hold on to the past, to power, pride, and the system that made them rich. Their cotton empire was built on the backs of enslaved men and women, people who worked, cried, and died in silence. And as time passed, the silence broke. Protests rose. Newspapers flamed with anger. One man's freedom became another man's fear. Every speech, every law, every vote became a spark. And America was a forest full of dry leaves. All it needed was one match. Chapter 2. The War Begins. April 12, 1861. The sun hadn't even risen properly when cannons roared at Fort Sumter. Smoke filled the sky. Men who once worked together now pointed guns at each other. That was the moment when the American Civil War began. No one thought it would last long. Just a few months, they said, but it stretched into 4 long years. 4 years of fear, hunger, and heartbreak. More than 600,000 soldiers never came back. Fathers buried their sons. Wives waited for letters that never arrived. Children grew up beside graves instead of playgrounds. And yet, inside all this pain, something greater was being born. James M. McPherson's Battle Cry of Freedom captures this transformation, not through dry facts, but through the emotions of real people. He writes about soldiers who marched barefoot, letters soaked in blood and rain, leaders who doubted themselves, and a president, Abraham Lincoln, who carried the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. McPherson makes you feel the war, not just read it. Chapter 3. The Meaning of Freedom. Lincoln wasn't a man chasing victory. He was a man chasing meaning. In the beginning, his only goal was to keep the Union together. But as the war grew darker, Lincoln's heart changed. He saw the truth, that a country cannot call itself free while millions of its people live as slaves. In 1863 came the Emancipation Proclamation, the moment America took its first real breath of freedom. But it wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a declaration of pain, courage, and belief that even if it costs blood, freedom is worth fighting for. McPherson writes that the Civil War wasn't only a battle of armies, it was a battle of ideas. What does it mean to be free? What is the price of equality? Can a nation built on contradiction ever find peace? These questions echoed louder than the gunfire. Chapter 4. The Price of Unity. By 1865, the war was ending, but victory didn't look like celebration. It looked like exhaustion. Cities burned, farmlands turned to dust, graves stretched farther than the eye could see. But in the middle of that destruction, a new dawn began to rise. Slavery was abolished, the Union was restored, and though America stood scarred and broken, it had finally begun to understand what freedom truly means. McPherson shows this not as a story of heroes and villains, but of human beings, flawed, emotional, brave, afraid, trying to build a better tomorrow from the ruins of yesterday. Chapter 6. The Human Side of War. When we talk about war, we often talk about armies, maps, and victories, but McPherson shows us the side that history books often hide, the human side. Imagine a soldier standing in a muddy trench, his boots torn, his hands shaking, writing a letter to his mother that might never reach her. Imagine a young woman waiting at home. Every knock on the door could mean either her husband's return or his death. War McPherson reminds us, is not made of heroes and glory. It's made of fear, hunger, and silence between cannon blasts. There were soldiers who didn't even know what they were fighting for anymore. Some fought for ideals, some fought just to survive, and some because they had no choice. And yet, amid all the blood and smoke, there were moments of kindness. A southern soldier sharing water with a dying man from the north, a nurse praying for both sides. Moments where humanity quietly whispered, "Even in war, we are still human." McPherson captures these small acts like sparks in the darkness, the reminders that even when nations lose themselves, the heart never completely forgets compassion. Chapter 7. Lincoln's Burden. Abraham Lincoln was not a warrior. He was a thinker, a dreamer, and a man burdened by choices no human should ever have to make. Every decision he took meant thousands of lives. Every night, he carried the weight of both victory and death. McPherson portrays Lincoln not as a perfect hero, but as a man of conscience, constantly questioning himself. He writes about Lincoln's sleepless nights, his silent walks through empty corridors of the White House, the letters he never sent and the tears he never showed. Lincoln's pain was personal. He had lost his own son during the war. Yet he stood tall, believing that one day this nation would rise stronger, not divided by color or creed, but united by purpose. And when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, it wasn't just ink on paper. It was blood turned into words, a declaration that every man, no matter his color or past, had the right to stand tall in the light of freedom. Lincoln carried that hope till his very last breath. And when he fell, a single bullet tried to silence the dream he had built. But as McPherson writes, "You can kill a man, but not an idea whose time has come." Chapter 8. The Rebirth of a Nation. When the war finally ended in 1865, America stood on ashes, yet it breathed again. The South was ruined, the North was exhausted, but something new had begun: reconstruction. McPherson explains that the end of war wasn't the end of struggle, it was the beginning of rebuilding a broken soul. Millions of freed slaves now faced a new world, a world that promised equality but offered confusion. Land, work, respect, everything had to be rebuilt from zero. The soldiers who survived returned to homes that didn't feel like home anymore. Their memories were heavy, their dreams uncertain, and in that silence of rebuilding, America had to answer its hardest question yet. How do we heal from a wound we gave ourselves? McPherson beautifully describes this moment as a painful rebirth, because the Civil War didn't just change maps or governments, it changed hearts. It redefined what it meant to be an American. And maybe that's the real victory, not in the surrender of armies, but in the awakening of conscience. Final closing monologue, the eternal cry for freedom. Freedom is never quiet. It always begins with a cry of the oppressed, the dreamers, the forgotten. Battle Cry of Freedom isn't just the story of America's Civil War. It's the story of every nation, every soul that has ever fought to become free, inside or out. McPherson reminds us, freedom is not a moment. It's a lifetime of courage. It asks for sacrifice. It asks for faith. And sometimes, it asks for everything you have. So as you close this book, and as this video fades, remember this. The world you live in today was built on those cries, on those hearts that refused to give up. And the question now is, when your time comes, will you have the courage to stand for what's right?